The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, stood by the tall windows of her private study. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the official letter that had arrived just hours before. The words seemed to blur together, but their meaning was crystal clear. Prince William had been called to serve in a dangerous peacekeeping mission overseas, one that would take him away from his family for months, possibly longer. Catherine had always known this day might come. As a senior member of the royal family and a trained military officer, William carried responsibilities that extended far beyond the palace walls. But knowing something intellectually and facing it emotionally were two entirely different things. She thought about their 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, still sleeping peacefully in their beds, unaware that their world was about to change. The couple had built a life together that balanced their royal duties with their roles as parents. William had worked hard to be present for his children in ways his own father hadn't always been able to manage. Evening bath times, bedtime stories, school runs when possible. These moments had become the foundation of their family life. Now that foundation felt suddenly fragile. As Catherine heard William's footsteps approaching down the corridor, she quickly wiped away a tear that had escaped despite her efforts to remain composed. The heavy oak door opened and William entered, his face grave but determined. He was already dressed in his uniform, the familiar sight both comforting and heartbreaking. Without words, he crossed the room and enveloped Catherine in his arms. "How long do we have?" Catherine whispered against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne, trying to memorize every detail of this moment. "The flight leaves at noon," William replied, his voice steady but strained. "We need to tell the children soon. I want to have breakfast with them, explain things properly before the media gets wind of it." Catherine nodded, knowing that once the news broke, their private moment of grief would become public property. The British people had come to love William and Catherine for their genuine affection and down-to-earth approach to royal life. But that same public attention meant that even their most personal moments would be scrutinized and analyzed. They held each other in silence for several minutes, both understanding that this embrace might have to sustain them through the long separation ahead. Outside, the palace staff were already beginning their daily routines, unaware that by evening everything would be different. William pulled back slightly, cupping Catherine's face in his hands. "We'll get through this," he said, his blue eyes meeting hers with unwavering conviction. "We've faced challenges before. This is just another one we'll overcome together, even if we're apart." Catherine managed a small smile, drawing strength from his confidence. She had learned over the years that being married to a future king meant accepting sacrifices that ordinary couples never had to make. But that didn't make those sacrifices any easier to bear. "The children will be so proud of you," she said, though her voice caught slightly on the words, "just like I am." As if summoned by their conversation, the sound of small feet running down the hallway announced that at least one of their children was awake. George's voice called out, looking for his parents to start what he assumed would be an ordinary Saturday morning. William and Catherine exchanged a look that said everything. Their time for private sorrow was over. Now they had to be parents first, putting on brave faces and finding the right words to explain to 3 young children why their father had to go away. The door burst open as 8-year-old George bounded in, his hair tousled from sleep, followed more cautiously by 6-year-old Charlotte and 4-year-old Louis. The children's excited chatter about weekend plans filled the room, and for a moment both parents simply watched their children with hearts full of love and approaching loss. "Good morning, my darlings," Catherine said, her voice steadier now, falling naturally into her role as mother. "Daddy has something important to tell you all. Shall we go have breakfast together?" As the family made their way toward the dining room, William and Catherine walked hand in hand, stealing one last moment of connection before the day ahead would sweep them toward an inevitable goodbye. The family breakfast table had never felt so heavy with unspoken words. William watched his children eagerly spreading jam on their toast, their innocent chatter about weekend plans and upcoming school events creating a bittersweet soundtrack to what he knew would be one of the most difficult conversations of his life. George, always the most perceptive of the 3, seemed to sense something was different. He kept glancing between his parents, noting his father's formal uniform and his mother's unusual quietness. Charlotte was busy arranging her fruit into patterns on her plate, while Louis focused intently on not spilling his orange juice. "Children," William began, his voice gentle but serious enough to capture their attention. "I need to talk to you about something important." 3 pairs of curious eyes turned toward him, and William felt his heart constrict. "How do you explain duty and sacrifice to children who just want their father to be there for their football matches and bedtime stories? You know how Daddy sometimes has to travel for work to help people in other countries?" William continued, reaching across the table to take George's hand. "Well, there are some people very far away who need special help right now, and I've been asked to go help them." Charlotte's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "How far away?" she asked, her voice small. "Very far, sweetheart. I'll be gone for several months." William's voice remained steady, but Catherine could see the effort it took. Louis, not fully understanding but sensing the gravity of the situation, scooted closer to his mother. "But you'll come back for my birthday?" he asked hopefully. William's composure wavered for just a moment. Louis's birthday was still 3 months away, and there was no guarantee he would be back by then. "I'm going to try my very best to be back for your birthday, Louis, but if I can't make it, we'll have the biggest celebration when I do come home." George, mature beyond his 8 years, asked the question that was weighing on all their minds. "Is it dangerous, Daddy?" William had always been honest with his children, believing they deserved truth appropriate to their age. "There might be some danger," he admitted, "but I'll be with very brave and skilled people who will help keep me safe. And I'll be helping to keep other people safe too." Catherine watched her eldest son process this information, seeing William's thoughtful nature reflected in George's serious expression. She reached over to smooth his hair, a gesture that had comforted him since he was a baby. "I'm scared," Charlotte whispered, tears beginning to well in her eyes. William immediately stood and gathered his daughter into his arms. "Oh, my brave girl," he murmured, holding her close. "It's okay to be scared. Mummy and I are scared too. But do you know what helps when we're scared?" Charlotte shook her head against his shoulder. "We remember how much we love each other. Love is stronger than fear, and it travels anywhere, even across oceans. Every night when you look at the stars, you'll know that I'm looking at the same stars, and we'll be connected by our love." George had been silent for several minutes, and when he finally spoke, his words surprised everyone. "I want to be brave like you, Daddy. I'll help take care of Mummy and Charlotte and Louis while you're gone." The pride and heartbreak that crossed William's face in that moment was almost too much for Catherine to bear. Their little boy was already showing signs of the future king he would one day become, understanding that with privilege comes responsibility, even at such a young age. "You're already the bravest boy I know," William told his son. "But remember, being brave doesn't mean you can't be sad or scared. It means you keep going even when you feel those things." Louis, still not entirely grasping the full situation, climbed onto William's lap. "Will you call us every day?" he asked. "Every single day that I can," William promised, kissing the top of his youngest son's head. "And Mummy will help you send me pictures and videos so I can see how much you're growing." Catherine felt tears threatening again as she watched William with their children. This was the man she had fallen in love with, not just the prince or the future king, but the devoted father who would carry pictures of his children into whatever dangerous situation awaited him. "Now," William said, his voice brightening with obvious effort, "I have something special for each of you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out 3 small wrapped packages. "These are special coins that soldiers carry for good luck. I want you each to keep one, and I'll carry one that matches yours. Whenever you miss me, hold your coin and remember that I'm holding mine too." As the children unwrapped their gifts, examining the silver coins with wonder, Catherine marveled at her husband's ability to create comfort in the midst of sorrow. It was a gift that would serve him well in the difficult mission ahead, and it was one of the many reasons she loved him so deeply. The breakfast continued with William sharing stories about his previous military service, helping the children understand that this was part of who he was, part of what made him the man and father they loved. But as the morning wore on, everyone was acutely aware that their time together was growing short. The palace staff moved with quiet efficiency around the family as they spent their final hours together. Everyone understood the gravity of the situation, and there was an unspoken agreement to give the Wales family as much privacy as possible during these precious moments. William had changed out of his uniform temporarily, wanting to spend these last hours as simply a father and husband rather than a royal duty. He found himself on the floor of the playroom, building an elaborate castle with Louis while George and Charlotte worked on a large puzzle nearby. Every laugh, every casual touch, every ordinary moment felt magnified in its importance. Catherine moved between taking photos and simply watching, trying to capture not just images but memories. She photographed William reading to Louis, his large hands gently turning the pages of a favorite storybook. She captured the moment when Charlotte spontaneously hugged her father while they worked on the puzzle together. She took picture after picture of George and William playing chess, their faces serious with concentration. "Mummy, why are you taking so many pictures?" Charlotte asked during a break from their activities. Catherine knelt down to her daughter's level. "Because I want to make sure Daddy can see all the wonderful things you'll be doing while he's away. And I want us to remember this special day we're having together." The afternoon passed both too quickly and too slowly. William seemed to be trying to pack months of fathering into a few hours. He helped Louis with a difficult puzzle piece, praised Charlotte's drawing, and had a serious conversation with George about looking after his younger siblings. Each interaction carried extra weight. Each hug lasted a little longer than usual. As the time for departure approached, the reality of the situation began to settle more heavily on everyone. Louis became clingy, refusing to let William out of his sight. Charlotte grew quieter, returning repeatedly to sit close to her father. George tried to maintain his brave facade, but Catherine could see the worry in his young eyes. The afternoon light was beginning to fade when William's private secretary appeared in the doorway, a discreet reminder that departure time was approaching. William nodded grimly, then turned back to his children with renewed intensity. "I want each of you to promise me something," he said, gathering all three children close. "Promise me you'll be good for Mummy, that you'll help each other, and that you'll remember how much Daddy loves you every single day." "We promise," the children chorused. Though their voices were subdued, Catherine excused herself briefly, overwhelmed by emotion and needing a moment to compose herself. She stepped into the adjacent room and allowed herself a few silent tears, gripping the back of a chair for support. When she returned, she found William showing the children on a map where he would be going. "It's very far," George observed, tracing the distance with his finger. "Yes, it is," William agreed. "But look here, this is where you'll be, right here at home. And no matter how far apart we are on this map, we're never apart in here." He placed his hand over his heart, and the children did the same. The sound of vehicles arriving in the courtyard signaled that the departure time had finally come. William's security detail and military escort were ready, and there could be no more delays. The family made their way to the private entrance where William's official car waited. Catherine had arranged for this goodbye to be completely private, away from any cameras or press attention. This moment belonged to their family alone, and she was determined to protect it from the public eye that would inevitably scrutinize every aspect of William's departure once the news broke. William hugged each child individually, whispering private words of love and encouragement. He lifted Louis high in the air one last time, making his youngest son giggle despite the tears. He held Charlotte close, promising to bring her something special from his travels. With George, he had a quiet conversation, passing along some final words of responsibility and pride. Finally, it was time for William and Catherine to say their own goodbye. In front of their children, they embraced with all the love and strength they had built over their years together. No words were needed. Everything important had already been said in glances and touches throughout the day. "Take care of yourself," Catherine whispered, her voice steady despite her breaking heart. "Take care of our babies," William replied, kissing her forehead one last time. As William's car pulled away from the palace, Catherine stood with their three children, watching until the vehicle disappeared from sight. The silence that followed was profound, not empty, but full of love and connection that would have to sustain them all through the uncertain months ahead. That evening, news of Prince William's deployment began to spread, but for now, in this quiet moment, it was simply a family dealing with separation, drawing strength from their love for each other and their faith that this too would pass. The news of Prince William's deployment spread across Britain like wildfire by evening. Catherine had expected this, but seeing it unfold still felt surreal. Television screens across the nation showed the same official palace statement, while news anchors discussed the significance of a future king taking on such a dangerous mission. Back at the palace, Catherine sat in her private sitting room with the children, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. The television was off. She had made the decision that tonight would be about family, not about what the outside world was saying. Instead, they were having an impromptu movie night, something that had become a tradition whenever the family needed comfort. Louis had fallen asleep against Catherine's side during the second film, his small hand still clutching the lucky coin William had given him. Charlotte was curled up in her favorite armchair, fighting sleep but determined to stay close to her mother. George sat on the floor, supposedly watching the movie, but Catherine could see his mind was elsewhere. "Mummy," George said quietly during a lull in the film, "do you think people will understand why Daddy had to go?" Catherine paused the movie and looked at her eldest son with pride and sadness. Even at 8 years old, George was already thinking about public perception and duty in ways that showed his understanding of their unique position. "What do you think?" Catherine asked gently, believing George should explore his own feelings about the situation. George considered this seriously. "I think some people will understand because they know Daddy wants to help others, but some people might be angry because they think he should stay here with us." Catherine was struck by his mature insight. "You're probably right. People will have different opinions, but what matters most is that Daddy is doing what he believes is right, and that we support him even when it's hard for us." Charlotte stirred in her chair. "Will people say mean things about us?" she asked, her voice small with worry. Catherine's heart ached at the question. Her 6-year-old daughter was already learning that their family's choices would be judged by strangers, a burden that came with their royal status. "Some people might," Catherine answered honestly, "but we know the truth about why Daddy had to go, and that's what matters. The people who love us will understand." As if summoned by their conversation, Catherine's phone buzzed with a call from William. The children immediately perked up and Catherine put the call on speaker so they could all talk to their father. "How are my brave children?" William's voice filled the room, tinged with static from the international connection but warm with love. "Daddy!" Louis woke up at the sound, immediately alert. "Are you far away now?" "Very far, little man, but not too far to talk to you every day. Tell me what you've been doing since I left." The children took turns sharing their evening with their father, from dinner to movie night to Charlotte's account of comforting Louis when he cried earlier. Catherine listened to these exchanges with a mixture of joy and sorrow. Joy at how naturally they connected despite the distance. Sorrow at hearing the slight strain in William's voice that spoke of his own struggle with separation. "Mummy looks sad," Charlotte reported with the brutal honesty of a 6-year-old. "But she's trying to be brave like you told us to be." Catherine felt her cheeks warm as William chuckled softly. "Is that right? Well, it's okay for Mummy to be sad. I'm sad too, missing all of you. But we're all being brave together, aren't we?" After the children said their goodnights and headed to bed, Catherine took the phone off speaker for a private conversation with William. She could hear the exhaustion in his voice now that he didn't have to maintain cheerfulness for the children. "How are you, really?" she asked. "Tired. Worried about you and the children. Missing home already. And I've only been gone 12 hours. His honesty was a relief after the careful optimism he had maintained for the children. "The children are handling it better than I expected," Catherine told him. "George is being incredibly mature about everything. Almost too mature." "I worry about that," William admitted. "He shouldn't have to grow up so fast." "None of them should have to deal with this," Catherine said, her voice catching slightly. "But they're strong like their father. We'll get through this." They talked for another 20 minutes, sharing details about William's journey and making plans for staying connected during his deployment. When they finally said goodbye, Catherine felt both comforted by the contact and more aware of the vast distance between them. Later that night, as Catherine checked on each sleeping child, she found George still awake, staring at the ceiling. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly, sitting on the edge of his bed. "I keep thinking about Daddy," George whispered. "Do you think he's scared?" Catherine chose her words carefully. "I think Daddy might be a little scared, just like we are. But he's with good people who will help keep him safe, and he's doing important work. Sometimes being brave means doing things that scare us because they're the right thing to do." George nodded slowly. "Like when I had to give that speech at school even though I was nervous?" "Exactly like that," Catherine smiled, smoothing his hair. "You were scared, but you did it anyway because it was important. That's exactly what Daddy is doing now." As she tucked George back in and kissed his forehead, Catherine realized that this deployment would change all of them. The children would grow up a little faster. She would become stronger and more independent, and William would carry the weight of duty in a way he never had before. But they would survive it, and they would be stronger as a family because of it. Outside, the palace grounds were quiet except for the distant sound of London traffic. But Catherine knew that across the nation, people were thinking about their family, some with sympathy, others with criticism, but all with interest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the full reality of William's absence began to settle in. But tonight, they had made it through their first day apart. 3 weeks had passed since William's departure, and the palace had settled into a new rhythm. Catherine had thrown herself into her royal duties with renewed vigor, finding that staying busy helped manage the ache of missing her husband. The children had adapted to their father's absence with the resilience of youth, though they still asked about him daily and treasured their evening phone calls. The British public had rallied around the family in ways that surprised even Catherine. Thousands of letters and packages arrived daily at the palace, filled with messages of support, drawings from children, and care packages for William to be forwarded to his deployment location. The outpouring of love had been overwhelming and comforting during the lonely nights. George had indeed stepped up as the man of the house in small but meaningful ways. He helped Louis tie his shoes each morning, read bedtime stories to Charlotte when Catherine was running late, and even tried to comfort his mother when he thought she wasn't looking. His maturity both impressed and worried Catherine, who tried to ensure he still had time to simply be an 8-year-old boy. Charlotte had channeled her emotions into art, creating dozens of drawings and paintings to send to her father. Her latest masterpiece showed the family under a rainbow, with an airplane in the sky carrying William back home. Louis, the youngest, asked the most direct questions about when Daddy would return, and struggled the most with the concept of time and distance. On this particular morning, Catherine was reviewing her schedule when her private secretary knocked softly on her study door. "Ma'am, there's been a development regarding His Royal Highness." Catherine's heart immediately raced, fearing the worst. "What kind of development?" "Nothing dangerous, ma'am," the secretary quickly assured her, seeing her panic. "But there's been a communication blackout in the region where Prince William is stationed. It's temporary, but it means there may be no contact for several days, possibly a week or more." Catherine sank into her chair, processing this news. The daily phone calls had become the anchor point of their days, the moment when the family felt connected despite the distance. How would she explain to the children that even this small comfort would be taken away? "Has this happened before during his deployment?" Catherine asked. "It's not uncommon during certain types of operations, ma'am. The last message from Prince William indicated he was safe and well, but operational security requires complete communication silence for a period." Catherine nodded, understanding the necessity but dreading the conversation with her children. That evening, when the usual call time came and went without contact, 3 pairs of worried eyes turned to her for explanation. "Daddy can't call us for a little while," Catherine explained gently. "Sometimes to keep everyone safe where he's working, they have to turn off all the phones and computers. It doesn't mean anything bad has happened. It just means we have to wait a bit longer to hear from him." Louis's face crumpled. "But I wanted to tell him about my drawing." Charlotte moved closer to her youngest brother. "We can save up all our stories and tell him lots of things when he calls again," she suggested with the wisdom of a 6-year-old trying to comfort others. George, as usual, asked the more complex question. "How long is a little while?" "We don't know exactly," Catherine admitted. "It could be a few days, or it might be longer. But Daddy will call us as soon as he's able to." The days that followed were more difficult than Catherine had anticipated. Without the daily connection to William, the reality of his absence felt heavier. The children were more clingy, and Catherine found herself checking her phone obsessively for any word from the Ministry of Defense. On the 5th day without contact, Catherine made a decision that surprised even herself. She gathered the children in the sitting room and suggested they make a video message for William, even though they couldn't send it immediately. "We'll record everything we want to tell Daddy," she explained. "All our news, all our love, everything we're thinking. Then when he can talk to us again, we'll have so much to share." The children embraced this idea enthusiastically. They spent the afternoon creating an elaborate video filled with songs, drawings, updates about school and friends, and endless declarations of love and pride. Catherine found herself joining in, adding her own messages of support and love. George performed a magic trick he'd been practicing. Charlotte sang a song she'd learned at school. Louis simply talked to the camera as if William were right there, sharing every detail of his day in the rambling way of a 4-year-old. Catherine recorded herself reading one of William's favorite poems, knowing he would appreciate the familiar words. As the week stretched on, the video grew longer. Each day brought new segments as the children thought of more things they wanted to share with their father. The project became a source of comfort and connection, a way to feel close to William even in his absence. The palace staff noticed the change in the family's spirits. Where there had been sadness and worry, there was now purpose and anticipation. The children talked excitedly about surprising their father with the video, and Catherine found herself smiling more genuinely than she had since William's departure. Local schools and community groups had also rallied around the family. George's school organized a letter-writing campaign, where students created messages of support for soldiers deployed overseas. Charlotte's ballet class performed, a special routine dedicated to Charlotte's daddy and all the brave people helping others far away. The community support helped the children feel that their father's sacrifice was recognized and valued. On the 8th day of silence, Catherine was reviewing official papers when her phone buzzed with an international number. Her heart leaped as she answered, and William's familiar voice filled the room. "Catherine, can you hear me? I'm sorry for the silence. Are you all okay?" The relief was so overwhelming that Catherine had to sit down. "We're fine," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "We're all fine. We have so much to tell you." Within minutes, the children had been summoned and the phone was on speaker as 3 excited voices competed to share their news with their father. The joy and relief in the room was palpable as the family reconnected across the miles. "We made you a video, Daddy," Louis announced proudly. "It's very long because we had lots to say." William's laughter, clear and warm despite the distance, filled their home once again. The week of silence had been difficult, but it had also shown them all just how strong their bond truly was, unbreakable by distance or time. 2 months into William's deployment, the family had found their new normal, but everything changed with one unexpected phone call. Catherine was reviewing her diary for the next week when her private secretary's grave expression told her something was seriously wrong before he even spoke. "Ma'am, we've received word from the Ministry of Defense. There's been an incident in Prince William's region." "He's safe," he added quickly, seeing Catherine's face drain of color. "But there have been casualties, and his return timeline may be affected." Catherine's hands trembled as she absorbed this information. The theoretical danger had suddenly become frighteningly real. "How many casualties? What kind of incident?" "The details are still coming in, ma'am. What we know is that Prince William's convoy encountered hostile forces while delivering aid to a remote village. Several soldiers were injured, but Prince William acted quickly to coordinate the evacuation of wounded personnel. He's being hailed as a hero, but the situation in the region has become more volatile." That evening's phone call with William was different from all the others. His voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before, and Catherine could hear the exhaustion and stress despite his efforts to remain upbeat for the children. "I can't give you many details," William explained after the children had said their goodnights, "but today reminded me why this mission is so important. The people here desperately need help, and if we don't provide it, no one will." Catherine felt torn between pride in her husband's bravery and terror at how close they had come to losing him. "The children don't know about what happened today," she said. "I thought it would be better to wait until we know more." "You're right," William agreed. "There's no point in worrying them unnecessarily. But Catherine, I need you to know that today made me realize how much I have to live for. Every decision I make here, I think about coming home to you and the children." The next morning brought news that would test the family's strength even further. William's commanding officer called Catherine directly to explain that William had volunteered to extend his deployment by an additional month to help train local security forces. It was an opportunity to make a lasting difference, but it meant even more time apart. "He doesn't know I'm calling you," the officer explained. "Prince William wanted to discuss it with you first, but I thought you should have time to process this before he brings it up. He's truly making a difference here, ma'am. The work he's doing could help stabilize this region for years to come." Catherine felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Another month felt like an eternity, especially after yesterday's close call. But she also understood William's sense of duty and his desire to complete meaningful work rather than simply fulfill an obligation. When William called that evening, Catherine could hear the uncertainty in his voice as he broached the subject. "There's an opportunity here," he began carefully, "something that could really make a lasting impact. But it would mean staying longer than we originally planned." "How much longer?" Catherine asked, though she already knew the answer. "Another month, possibly 6 weeks if the training program expands." Catherine closed her eyes, feeling the weight of another difficult decision. "What does your heart tell you to do?" "My heart tells me to come home to my family immediately," William answered without hesitation. "But my conscience tells me that leaving now would mean this mission was only half complete. The difference we could make in these additional weeks could affect thousands of lives." That night, Catherine made a decision that surprised even herself. The next morning, she called William back with her answer. "Extend the deployment," she said firmly. "The children and I will manage another month. What you're doing is too important to leave unfinished." "Are you certain?" William asked. "I know how hard this has been on all of you." "I'm certain," Catherine replied, though her voice caught slightly. "We're proud of you and we want you to complete this mission properly. Just promise me you'll be extra careful." Telling the children about the extension was one of the hardest conversations Catherine had ever had. George took the news with his characteristic maturity, though she could see the disappointment in his eyes. Charlotte cried openly, and Louis simply couldn't understand why Daddy would choose to stay away longer. "But I thought he missed us," Louis said through his tears. "If he misses us, why doesn't he just come home?" Catherine gathered her youngest son in her arms. "Oh, sweetheart, Daddy misses us terribly. But sometimes grown-ups have to finish important work even when they want to come home. It's like when you really want to stop doing your homework, but you know you need to finish it first." "Is Daddy's work helping people?" Charlotte asked, wiping her eyes. "Yes, darling."
"Daddy is helping people who don't have safe places to live."
"And he's teaching other people how to keep them safe even after he comes home." George, who had been quiet throughout this conversation, finally spoke up.
"So if Daddy finishes his work properly, those people will be safer forever?"
"That's right," Catherine confirmed. George straightened his shoulders. "Then he should stay and finish it. We can wait a little longer if it means helping people forever." The wisdom and selflessness of her 8-year-old son took Catherine's breath away. In that moment, she saw not just William's influence in their son, but the beginning of the kind of king George might one day become. That evening, when they called William to tell him about their conversation, the pride and love in his voice was unmistakable. "I have the most incredible family in the world," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The news of the deployment extension became public the next day, and the response was mixed. Some praised William's dedication to duty, while others criticized him for putting mission before family. But inside the palace walls, the Wales family knew they had made the right decision together, even though it came with a price that only they truly understood. 4 months after that difficult goodbye, the day Catherine had dreamed about finally arrived. William was coming home. The call had come at dawn, with his commanding officer explaining that the mission had been completed successfully, and Prince William would be returning within 48 hours. Catherine sat in her bedroom, holding the phone long after the call had ended, hardly daring to believe it was real. 4 months had felt like 4 years, filled with sleepless nights, worried days, and the constant ache of missing the man she loved. But they had survived it, and somehow they had all grown stronger. The children's reactions when she told them were everything she had hoped for and more. Louis screamed with joy and ran around the room in circles. Charlotte burst into happy tears and immediately started planning a welcome home party. George, true to his nature, asked practical questions about timing and then quietly began organizing his siblings. "We need to make everything perfect for Daddy," George announced with the authority of a much older child. "Charlotte, you should finish that painting you've been working on. Louis, we need to practice that song we learned. Mommy, what's Daddy's favorite dinner?" Catherine watched her eldest son take charge with a mixture of pride and sadness. He had grown up so much during these months, taking on responsibilities that should have been beyond his years. She made a mental note to ensure he had time to simply be a child again once William returned. The palace staff threw themselves into preparations with the same enthusiasm as the family. Cook planned William's favorite meal. The housekeepers ensured every room was spotless. and the security team coordinated the private arrival that would allow the family their reunion without media interference. Catherine spent hours getting ready, changing outfits 3 times before settling on a simple blue dress that William had always loved. She wanted to look beautiful for him, but more importantly, she wanted to look like herself, the woman he had fallen in love with and married, not just the Duchess who had appeared in newspapers throughout his absence. As the time for William's arrival approached, nervous energy filled the palace. The children checked the windows every few minutes, and Catherine found herself unable to sit still. 4 months of separation had built up so much anticipation that she almost didn't know how to contain it. The sound of vehicles in the courtyard sent the children running to the windows. Catherine followed more slowly, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Through the glass, she saw the familiar black car pull up to the private entrance, and then the door opened. William stepped out, looking tired but healthy, still wearing his military uniform. For a moment, he simply stood there, looking up at the palace he called home, as if absorbing the reality of being back. Then his eyes found the windows where his family waited, and the smile that crossed his face was radiant. The children couldn't be contained any longer. They raced from the window to the entrance hall, with Catherine following behind, her composure finally cracking as tears of joy and relief streamed down her face. William walked through the doors he had left 4 months ago, and suddenly the entrance hall was filled with the chaos of a family reunion. Louis launched himself into his father's arms with such force that William staggered backward, laughing. Charlotte was right behind him, wrapping herself around William's waist and refusing to let go. George approached more slowly, but when William knelt down to embrace his eldest son, the boy's careful composure melted away. "I missed you so much, Daddy," George whispered against his father's shoulder. "I tried to be brave like you said, but it was really hard sometimes." "You were incredibly brave," William assured him, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of all of you. You took such good care of Mummy and each other." Finally, it was Catherine's turn. The children stepped back, sensing that their parents needed this moment. William stood and looked at his wife with eyes full of love and gratitude. They had both changed during these months apart. He looked older, more weathered by his experiences, while she appeared stronger, more confident in her independence. "And hello, beautiful," William said softly. The same words he had spoken to her on their wedding day. "Welcome home," Catherine replied. And then they were in each other's arms, holding on as if they would never let go again. The embrace lasted for several minutes, both of them crying openly now, releasing months of worry, loneliness, and love. The children watched quietly, understanding somehow that this moment was sacred and important. "Are you really home?" Catherine whispered against William's chest. "Really home to stay?" "I'm really home," William confirmed, pulling back to look into her eyes. "The mission is complete, and I'm exactly where I belong." That evening, the family had the dinner they had all dreamed about throughout the separation. William sat at the head of the table, with Catherine beside him and the children chattering excitedly as they shared months of stored-up stories and experiences. The lucky coins that had connected them across the distance sat in a small bowl in the center of the table, no longer needed but treasured as symbols of their endurance. As they prepared for bed, William tucked each child in personally, something he had dreamed about during lonely nights overseas. He listened to their prayers, read them stories, and answered dozens of questions about his experiences, carefully editing his responses for young ears. Later, as William and Catherine lay in their own bed for the first time in 4 months, they talked quietly about everything that had happened during their separation. William shared carefully chosen details about his mission, while Catherine told him about the children's growth, her own challenges, and how the experience had changed them all. "I'm proud of you," William said, stroking Catherine's hair in the darkness. "You were incredible while I was gone. The children, your work, everything, you handled it all with such grace." "We all did what we had to do," Catherine replied. "But I never want to be a part like that again." "Neither do I," William agreed. "This experience taught me that my most important mission will always be here, with you and our children." As they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, both William and Catherine knew that while the separation had been one of the most difficult experiences of their lives, it had also strengthened their family in ways they were only beginning to understand. They had proven to themselves and to the world that love truly could overcome any distance, and that duty and family could coexist, even when the balance was difficult to maintain. The farewell that had moved a nation 4 months earlier had become a reunion that reaffirmed everything beautiful about commitment, sacrifice, and the enduring power of love.